Good morning, everyone. My name is Mahika, and I am a fourth year UNSW student. I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, and I'm majoring in Psychology and Theatre. Today, I'm really excited to host the Prepping for Success Time Management 101 event, and I would like to give a warm welcome to all our commencing students online today. Whether you're commencing your studies on campus or tuning in virtually, we're thrilled you're joining the UNSW community. Before I begin, I'd like to show my respects and acknowledge the Badigal and Gadigal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which UNSW campuses stand on, of elders past and present on which this event takes place. Prepping for Success is a virtual event series that aims to introduce first years to a range of university systems, support services, and tools to help you transition smoothly into your first year of university. As a student, I firsthand know how confusing and how overwhelming your journey can be at university. And I really encourage you to take advantage of all the events on offer as a part of the series, as well as the Q&A sessions, which are a great end of each event. Now, without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Bridie Martin, who is a student support advisor at UNSW, who is here to share her advice on how you can manage your time during university.
Hi everyone, I want to welcome you all, same as Mahika, to UNSW. Thank you for joining us today for today's time management workshop. I'm really glad to see that we had lots of people coming today to attend this workshop. We have been running this for some time now, and we've recognised that time management is kind of a big issue when it comes to university. And for many of you, if this is your first year at uni, it is very different to high school. You'll often find in some ways you have a lot more time, and then in other ways you feel like you're always behind time. So we're going to go through a few things today in the workshop, and I'm really hoping that we can make this as interactive as possible. I'd love you guys to engage in the chat box. We want to hear your perspectives on, how time is, something that is either an issue for you, or if it's something that you feel that you're really competent with but want to learn new skills, any kind of feedback that you'd like to give us into the chat box, that's really helpful. Also, I'll be asking you guys some questions throughout today's workshop, and I'd really love if you can or do have the opportunity to put in the chat box an answer. We'll kind of be looking at your answers as we go through. So just an overview for today's workshop. We are going to be talking about a couple of things that are really important. One is time, obviously. The other is energy and focus, okay, and how these things perhaps interact. We're going to go through a few of the myths about time management. There is a lot of different perspectives out there about how to manage time well and the benefits of managing time, but there's also a lot of kind of talk about things that may not, really be helpful when we're thinking about time management as a skill. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why time schedules never work. And I'm sure if you've ever designed a time schedule, you might have experienced this. So we'll touch on that a little bit later in the workshop. And then at the end, we're going to talk about, I'm going to provide you guys my kind of 5 tips for success. And this is really going to be targeted around university, okay? What it's like to be a university student, and I suppose these tips come from my experience at being in the student support service. So we see hundreds of students every term that have some, struggles with time management, and so it's kind of, put together from the perspective of both students as well as the advisors and as well as the research that's out there about time management. So we'll get cracking on the first question that I want to pose to you guys is, if you could create more of one thing, which would you choose? So would you create more time, more energy, or more focus? So I'm going to give you guys about a minute to reflect on this question, and I would really love for you to put your answers into the chat box. I'm going to be monitoring that chat box, so I will try to get your feedback, but I'd really like to know, which one would you create more of? Time, energy, or focus? And again, this is interactive, so if you have your chat box open, please pop your answer in the chat box. We'll be waiting to hear from you guys. And yeah, we're going to try and make this as informative and interesting as possible for you. So I'll hold tight and we'll give you probably another, say, 30 seconds or 45 seconds. I suppose a lot of you are probably considering these three things as perhaps equally as important. That would not surprise me at all. They are all very important. But yeah, I suppose, when we think about time management, it's important to consider that a lot of the time we're not managing time. We're actually managing our energy levels. Okay, so a lot of students will come to the student support service and they'll say, look, I feel like I'm really struggling to keep on top of my work, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for why, they might be falling behind on their readings or not being able to catch up on past lectures. So there's often what seems like a time management issue, but when you dig a little deeper, it seems like, okay, there's not actually a time issue, but it might be around how much energy do you have to give to studying. So we've got some answers already coming in. One student has said energy, that they would much prefer to create more energy. We've got 3 students who have said that they would really prefer to create more focus. There's been 1 person come in who's requested that they would create more time. And now we've got, I think, another few saying that they would prefer to increase their amount of focus. If I was to pop that to you, Mahika, just as a student and a 4th year student, I'm sure you're feeling quite low on energy, although you have had a holiday. What would you say to that question? More time, energy, or focus?
Yeah, I think all 3 of those are definitely things that I want more of. But I'd say more time to do the things that I want to do, as well as like the things that I have to do, the balance between the 2.
Yeah, fabulous. So I totally agree with all of the students. These 3 things are hugely important for when you're trying to manage your studies, especially when you're perhaps a student who might have work as well. And then also you've probably got things going on in your private life that you need to manage as well. So sometimes it's really important to know that, okay, maybe I've got the time, but maybe it is a focus problem. Have I really sat down, and am I in a state to be able to concentrate and focus? So I definitely hear the students that say more focus would be really, really helpful. So yes, all of these things do overlay. And I suppose I put this question mark there because really it's not the full picture, okay? We do, yes, need to manage our time and our energy levels as well as our capacity to focus. But underneath all of those things, there is also one more component. So again, I'm hoping you're all connecting to our chat box. I would love to ask you guys, if you were to think about something that might equally be important when thinking about how to manage time and your energy and your focus, what might that thing be? Now, there is no right or wrong here. In fact, there probably is quite a lot of answers to this, but I'd love you to just have a quick think, perhaps even 30 seconds or so, to come up with what you think might be another thing that is important when thinking about your management of your time. So 30 seconds. I might actually pop it to you, Mahika, in this time when we're getting some feedback. I know you might have seen the slides, but if you were thinking about something, what might it be? Is there anything that you've personally thought about in terms of your
This one's a little bit hard,
Okay.
Trying to think what could be in the middle of all of this that kind of contributes.
Okay, don't have an answer because it doesn't come immediately. That's okay.
Yeah, is it like balance or skills? I'm not too sure.
Well, I love both of those answers. So balance, yes, and you know, that is definitely a part of being a good student, is to make sure that we have balance, and we will touch a bit more on that later in the PowerPoint. But also your point about skills, yes, this is a skill. Being able to manage your time well is not something that we generally learn. Sometimes we don't learn it at all at high school if you are, again, a commencing student. So, you know, it is something that we do need to learn over time. So I really like that point. But I think we haven't had a response in the chat box yet. So what I will tell you is motivation. Okay. So motivation is something that will probably underpin how we manage these three elements. Okay. And again, motivation is not something that is innate. Now, it is not something where we wake up and jump out of bed and say, yes, I'm going to manage time today. Okay, that would not make a whole lot of sense. It's not even something when we're thinking about if we're feeling tired or run down. We don't often think or feel motivated to perhaps make some changes. However, having the motivation to do these things is really important. The reason that it's important is that if you do focus on motivation, if you set some time aside to actually think about and connect with the reasons why you need to do something, then you are far more likely to be enjoying your studies. You're going to be doing what a lot of the research calls healthy striving. So that's where you are looking towards future goals. You're setting targets and you're aligning your time with those goals. How much time do I have to meet a particular goal? So you might be striving towards those goals, but not in a way that is going to cause undue stress or pressure. So there's another point of having good motivation, is that it actually builds resilience. Okay, and when we are feeling resilient, by that we mean that yes, there are always going to be challenges that come in our way. Life will always get in the way of your study. That is a normal part of being a human. But to have the resilience means I can find ways to work through strategically these problems and make sure that I keep going and do the best that I can. So that all kind of feeds into well-being, right? When we're feeling that we're enjoying what we're doing, we're working towards our goals, we feel we can overcome setbacks, we are going to feel like we're doing well. And then all of those components add to that one thing which we're all hoping for, is that we're productive, okay, that we get the work done, because there's going to be a lot of it. And another thing I just kind of want to, I suppose, bring up is that from the get-go, from week one, UNSW has short terms, okay, they're only 10 or so weeks, so we get right into it, and you want to be, you know, hit the ground running in that very first week. So you want to feel like you're getting on top of things and you're feeling productive. So it's important that we think about what are our motivations. It doesn't just come inside. It is something we have to sit down and deliberately think about, and even sometimes create a list, be very logical about it and say, what are the things that are driving me to get this particular task done? So yes, time, energy and focus, when we manage all of these things well, then we are going to feel more motivated as well. So it feeds back into itself. They're all components that are important to time management. Okay, so next question. Now, this one again, I'm hoping to have some feedback from the audience. If or how do you currently manage your life to create more time, energy, or focus. If you've got some things that you do already, I'd love you to just drop them in the chat box. You don't have to write a paragraph, even just a word or two, something that prompts you to think about this question. If you don't have any responses, that's okay. We're just getting you to think about this question of management. What do I do now? Okay, this is not so much about your responses in the chat box, but remember, this is all about your learning. So getting you to think about, okay, do I do anything at the moment? How do I manage my time at the moment? Or how do I manage that I get up and feel well and have energy? Or what can I do better, and what do I currently do to focus? So again, I'm going to drop this one back to you, Mahika, because you are definitely fourth year. It does mean you've probably had a lot of time to think about some of the problems that come up with time management. What's your thoughts on what you might do?
Yeah, something that's very much helped me a lot is having some sort of structure in my life, and definitely using Google Calendar, especially with uni when classes and things are not at like a certain time every term, kind of like high school was. Google Calendar has helped me a lot to be like, okay, this is where I have space and time in my life where I can do an assignment, or I can meet up with a friend here, or this is when I'm, working. And I'm a very big visual kind of person. So
Right.
having everything visually in front of me where I can kind of see all of that has definitely helped.
Yeah, so we've already had a response. So similar to you, Mahika, an online calendar where they block time out to make sure that I suppose there's particular things that they would like to do, planning weeks, days, or months ahead. That's really great. Microsoft To Do was a response from another student. So these are all kind of ways that we can use technology to help us to manage time well. I really love the idea that, if we use technology in a helpful way, then it can be really, really positive. It can have a positive influence in our lives. I always kind of have to come with the disclaimer that these kind of tools that we have are always risky. But yes, technology is a huge value for time management. We've had students talk about colour coding. Colour coding, wonderful. Colour coding is like a hack, okay? It's a quick, surefire way to identify between things. So you don't have to use kind of that, I suppose, that part of the brain where you're thinking through really methodically. The colour coding kind of jumps out at you and suggests something very quickly. We've had a student say writing a to-do list, or writing a list with steps to reach or what they need to do to reach an end goal. I really love that, and I think I will touch very briefly on that a little bit later in the presentation. But yes, having what I call a bullet journal is hugely important. Even if we don't follow it to a T, it is really important for the brain to get out what it's holding up here and put it onto paper. That process alone can be really helpful. It can allow us to go through a lot of the mind processes, such as prioritizing, such as thinking through things when we put it on paper. So yes, thank you to that person. Another person has said, a good morning routine gives me more time in the morning. I find I'm more focused and energized. And if I don't go on my phone as soon as I wake up, I go for a walk and I exercise instead. Wonderful. I don't know who that student is. I think it might be Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. I think we're going to cover a lot of that in this PowerPoint. Okay, that's really helpful. So Leon has said assessing short-term and long-term goals and trying to prioritize what needs to be done to work out what needs to be focused on. So yes, there are plenty of ways of knowing what is a priority. And we will touch a little bit more on what you've mentioned there, Leon. Okay, not letting small tasks build up. Love that idea. So they've suggested using an app where you can take, a double tap to mark tasks as completed, and this helps you feel good about doing them. Wonderful, fantastic idea, whoever that was. Have good sleep hygiene and prioritize sleep. Wonderful, we'll come back to that soon. Prioritize certain tasks, aspects of well-being to ensure balance. Beautiful, that was the important word that you brought up, Mahika, balance. Take occasional breaks when needed, journal my tasks and finish what's most important, and then take a break for a few hours, then get back to work. Okay, yeah, really fabulous. A few important points in that one. Journaling, great, and also taking breaks, really important. And if you want to look a little bit more into why taking a break is important, I would suggest you guys Google the research into diffused thinking, okay, if you're interested in that. So another one, I do the same with planning days, weeks and months. I color code and I make different aspects of my life because I'm also a visual person. So that comes to your point again, Mahika. I make a planner for the study period and then make a planner for each week. Yes, that's really good to hear. If you are someone who really likes to have a visual thing right in front of you, the university, when you do come back onto campus, does provide weekly planners. Oh, sorry, not weekly planners, I think yearly planners. So if you want to get your hands on one of them, that might be really helpful. Another student has said that they like to have an overview of what is important so that they can prioritise and focus for each subject. Okay, really wonderful stuff. Thank you so much, everyone. That feedback is really awesome. And it is going to be a lot of the things that we concentrate on or that I talk a little bit more about. So thank you for your engagement. Okay, so yes, when we're thinking about these three important elements, we also want to be thinking about how we are going to manage them, okay? So again, I'll say that managing is a skill, right? It's a metacognitive skill. So when we think about metacognitive skills, we're actually thinking about how we think. I know that sounds a little bit complex, but all it means is things like the 3 Ps, planning, prioritising, and, you know, that deadly procrastination problem often comes because we haven't taken into consideration the amount of time it takes to have a plan and to know what to prioritise. So I thought it would be really helpful for you guys to just focus on some of the myths, okay, because there are a lot of myths that students sometimes talk to me about when they come to a consultation with the Student Support Service. So the first one, okay, number one, is that having a deadline will motivate me. Now, at the Student Support Service, I am very aware that deadlines actually do nothing for motivation. In fact, most of the time, students will come to the service and say, look, it doesn't matter if I bring a deadline forward or I pop it on my calendar or I put an alarm in my phone. It doesn't mean that I'm going to get it done on time or even, you know, start it earlier than perhaps a few days or if not the night before. So it is a really common issue. It's also a very common issue or a habit that we pick up from previous study, perhaps in high school or any other, you know, places that you might have done learning or, you know, taken on learning before. So we've got to be conscious that just because we set a deadline doesn't mean we're going to be motivated to meet that deadline. Okay, they are two different things. We're going to be very aware of a deadline, but it doesn't mean, as I said, we're going to be able to find a meaning, or you call it motivation, but find meaning to do something. So yeah, it's really dangerous to rely on deadlines alone to get a task done. The second big myth, okay, is that having more time will produce better results. Now, again, I'm sure there's plenty of students out there who might understand this problem, that, you know, sometimes you feel that you need more time, and if you had just that bit more time, you might have gotten a better result. But what we know, and there's a lot of research also done on this, there was also something done in Harvard Review, that when you gave two teams the same task, but you gave one 4 weeks to do the task and the other team 4 days, they found that the team that had 4 days to do the task used less energy and resources, such as money or other things. They actually got the task done within the 4 days. And interestingly, and I think rather important to this whole PowerPoint, is that they actually had less stress, okay? So just because you're given more time, like this team that had 4 weeks, doesn't mean that you're going to get a better result, okay? And that is something that is a little bit of I suppose, something tricky to get our heads around, because we often want to drag out something. You will often be given assignments where they're 4 weeks ahead of the due date, and we will often try and use that 4 weeks, right, or think that we need 4 weeks because it's been designed for 4 weeks, when in actual fact, it's a bit of a hack, but you could probably sit down and get a lot of that done in less than the time that you're given. And there's often students that will come and say, hey, I spent a huge amount of time on this assignment and I got a really average result. And then there's often times where you'll not spend a whole lot of time on an assignment and you'll get a really fantastic result and you'll be shocked. So we just want to question our thoughts behind whether, giving a lot of, I suppose, time is necessarily important. I'm not saying that your studies don't need time. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But I think when we look at it more carefully, we actually need to give more time to those metacognitive things like prioritizing, planning, and having a bit of an idea about how to actually strategically meet the goal. Okay, so breaking things down. All right, the next big myth: motivation is easy to find and easy to maintain. Well, yeah, this kind of comes to my earlier point. There are times when we wake up and we feel really excited to do something. But often the reason that we feel that is because whatever that task is has meaning and purpose. And it's often something that we are connected with or connected to. A good example of this, and we often find this again with a lot of the students that come to see us, is that they're going to be far more motivated to do a task if, for an example, it is part of a group assignment. Now, why is that? Why would you be able to always get group assignments done on time compared to an assignment that might just come through, your own class where you have to hand something in? Well, often, again, the cause is that you're basing your motivation behind your reliance on other team members and the kind of healthy pressure there is to be able to support each other in getting the tasks done. There might be often chances when there's an assignment that really means something to you, but I, kind of don't want to burst the bubble, but it is important to recognise that a lot of the time at uni, there are things that you'll be learning that do feel disconnected. Now, that's not to say we sit and we let ourselves feel disconnected in the content, because you'll be thick in some content where you're right in the thick of it and you're not really sure. It's not to say you sit there and you, I suppose, worry about it. If that's a feeling where you're not really understanding something and it has no meaning to the broader, bigger picture, it's important that you reach out for help. So you can do that with a tutor, a lecturer, or someone else within the university like our service. Okay, and I also obviously do not want to forget that your peers are hugely important. So yes, we are in a COVID world and it is really hard to connect with other peers, but I highly recommend that you find someone in your course, either a study buddy or someone that you can, be accountable to, so that you have some additional motivation. The other point is to really think about, what is the meaning behind what I'm learning? Now that's adding another little, I suppose, check to your to-do list. And that's, part of planning ahead so that we can, really maintain motivation over a long period of time. Most of you will be at university for 3 years, maybe 4 or even longer if you choose to do postgrad. So your motivation for things is going to wax and wane. And that's just an expected part of being a student. So it's important that we think about motivation as something that is on that to-do list. How do I keep motivated? And we can talk a little bit perhaps about that, or you can, often have an appointment with a student support advisor and talk about any of those problems that might be coming up. All right, the fourth one, a detailed time schedule will fix everything. Okay, so I'm sure many of you have spent maybe half a day sitting down and coming up with some really detailed time schedule, only to find that it's out the window the next day. I've often had students come to the support service and say, look, I've got a huge problem. I really am bad at time management. I'm bad, I procrastinate, and I really need you to fix me. And I, generally say to that there is no quick fix to this. Time management is a really important skill that we learn over time. And we know from the research around metacognitive thinking, like planning or doing time management, that the earlier that you start to implement time management, the better you will be across a degree, the more you will enjoy your studies, and also you are more likely to get better grades. So students who are constantly improving and practicing these skills are going to end up perhaps in a more advantage stage at the end of the 4 years of their degree. So on that topic of time schedules, I've got another question for you guys. So yes, pull up your keyboard, your chat box. I want to put it to you guys, why do you think that these time schedules never work? So, okay, they might be helpful, but yeah, I just want to get a perspective, because I'm sure there's been times when you've designed one and then you haven't been able to use it. So if you could pop in the chat box for me, I'll give you another minute or two just to have a think about this question. And again, just pop a few words in the chat box. It doesn't have to be, a paragraph if you don't want to. And yes, I mean, I have a lot of ideas or reasons for why students come and report that these schedules don't work, but I'd love to hear from you guys. And also, Mahika, again, if you could perhaps give me one reason why you feel that a time schedule doesn't work for you personally, what would you say?
I think a lot of the times when I make a schedule, it's when I'm feeling really motivated, really ready to get my whole entire life in order. And I'm never realistic. I'm always like, I'm going to study for 5 consecutive hours. I'm going to take a 10-minute break and then do another 5. And then the next day I'm like, why was I ever thinking that I'm not doing this? So always make them when I'm in the motivated headspace, but not being a realist when I do it.
Okay, yeah, I really hear you. In fact, we all do that a bit when we've got that energy to go, yeah, look, I'm kicked into gear. I've got to make some changes. I'm going to design a time schedule. And yet we fall into the trap of perhaps not being very realistic about the goals or the kinds of time schedules that we put on ourselves to get things done. So, yeah, I definitely hear you. Okay, so some of the reasons that we've got back from students before is that often a time schedule feels too rigid. It's not flexible enough, and therefore they're not able to really follow it. So as I said earlier, it kind of, after day one, goes out the window because one thing didn't really happen to plan, and then we feel that, it's not really worth following. It doesn't take into account unexpected events. Yes, very much so. You will find that if you set time aside, let's say even to have lunch, and you go up to Subway at the university, and you might wait half an hour in the line just to get your food, right? Now, I'm sure you weren't expecting to take half an hour extra, but these things will always come up, unexpected events, and we can't really put them on paper. Another person has noted before that it kind of gets lost if they've designed one. It gets lost in their notes. They don't really access it very easily. So, it's not something that they go to even after they've designed it. Interestingly, another person has said before that it makes them feel more pressure and more stress. So often when they look at a time schedule, they might have combined their tasks that they have to do within the time schedule, and then looking at that broad picture of everything they need to do makes them feel uneasy or perhaps feel overwhelmed. And that's quite a common experience, that these time schedules tend to create that sense of, additional stress. The other one is that it never gives me enough time to do everything. So I think that comes back to Mahika's point a little bit, where, we've designed a schedule which perhaps isn't very realistic, and that the goals that we have for a day or even the week are going to take a lot longer than what our schedule has designed it to take, okay? So some of the answers that we have from you guys are, when I've done it, it's been unachievable and down to a T for timings because I'm trying to get too much done in the day. It also doesn't give wiggle room for when things change. Example, appointments and meetings with friends. And once that changes, it's hard to get back into. Yes, very much. Thank you for that answer. I do think that point about wiggle room is very true about schedules. Monkey brain didn't really like to stick to something that I planned a week ago. Okay, yeah, thanks for that student's feedback. The monkey brain, yeah, really big problem. If that is something that is difficult for you, I think what you're referring to with monkey brain is the inability to focus. Then yes, that's something definitely you can come to the student support team to talk about. My mental frame shifts as the day progresses. It's hard to predict when motivation will strike. Yep, really, really important. Okay, goal setting, not having a goal may mean you put less effort into whatever you're doing. Absolutely. People feel guilty about when the time schedule doesn't go to plan, and then they have a feeling of a sense of shame, which makes them even less productive. Yes, that is hugely important. We won't touch on that element so much in this PowerPoint, but I do want to say that yes, often a time schedule or setting unrealistic goals means that we're constantly disappointing ourselves, and that comes with a whole baggage of emotions such as shame, guilt, and not feeling like we're meeting expectations. And just a short note on that, when we are experiencing those difficult emotions, that important part of the brain that does prioritizing, that executive functioning part of the brain, switches off. Okay, so we kind of need a way to manage our expectations to be really healthy and studying well. Another one said it can make you feel unmotivated when you see a chunk of time being having to be allocated to certain things. Yep, I hear your point. Okay, so that feeling like it's very rigid and it's sometimes a bit depressing. Yeah, to look at a schedule and go, oh my gosh, this is what's going to happen. Underestimating the amount of time it takes. Something comes up which ruins it, and then I feel like not following it. Absolutely, I hear you. I've had that happen to me many a times. Unexpected things again, and then sometimes it's hard to maintain the energy for the time. So you might set, I think that person's saying you set time aside to do a particular task, but then motivation may wax or wane over that period, and so then it's hard to follow. They are all really fabulous answers. And I do hear what you're saying. It is a real experience to feel that you can't reach the goals that you're setting, okay? So that brings me to this real problem, which is that time schedules do not create more time, more energy, or focus, okay? So those three things that we touched on at the very beginning, that we need energy, we need time, and we need focus, and they are important for motivation. We're not going to get that out of a time schedule, okay? So pretending like we've sat down and written up some schedule that's going to give us, you know, a real leg up is just not going to happen, okay? And the earlier that we recognise that, the better, all right? So that's not to say that a time schedule is not a useful tool, all right? And I want to be very clear about the differences. So a time schedule can be very important because, one, we might find that, and a lot of students will report this, that they are falling into what I call a time hole, where they start the day off really well, and then before you know it, it's 5 p.m. and they don't know where the day went. Or it might be 3 o'clock in the afternoon and none of that beautiful to-do list got done. And so it's like they fell into a hole. They had no idea where the time went. So perhaps if we think about the time schedule as a way of just keeping an eye on ourselves, having awareness, okay, of where time might be going. If we don't have any way of monitoring or looking at time visually, then it's far less likely that we're going to start to build this inner mechanism for managing it. So yes, it is important for having some idea of where time might be going. It is also important to start to think about when you actually have the most energy. So again, we know a lot of students find the mornings, like one of the students said in the chat box, that the mornings are a really productive time for them. Other students do find that in the afternoon, or perhaps a little bit after lunch is a good time for them. Some feel really motivated before a lecture or a tutorial, and others, when they've gotten home, seem to kick into mode after they've gotten home from public transport, that they feel a lot more motivated to and have the energy to kind of get things going. So again, a time schedule, whether we set tasks in that schedule or not, it can be helpful for looking at mornings and evenings. My thoughts, and I will touch briefly on this in the next few slides, are that it's kind of really important to be trying to find a time, at least in every day, to switch off. Okay, we do need, for energy at least, it's not that we need more sleep, and that'll be something you'll hear lots of students say, oh, sleep is really, I'm all out of whack with my sleep. You'll find that sleep is actually, yes, hugely important, but what you actually need is rest, okay? And rest doesn't require sleeping, but it requires downtime, okay? So that was, you know, something which I touched on earlier about diffused thinking or having time away from your studies being really important. Okay, the last point that could be useful when designing a schedule is to think about your environment and how that might impact your ability to focus. So if we have a schedule, we can start to think about where we're going to be and when, and that can also help us to look at and think about that idea of focus. So when is it a good time for me to be able to sit down, to be able to eliminate as many distractions as possible, so that I can actually give myself the best opportunity to focus? So that's going to be really personal and vary for everybody. Okay, so how to set a realistic time schedule? Well, my go-to is always to put the non-negotiables first, okay? And what I call a non-negotiables, well, one, all right, you need to have consistent sleep, okay? Consistent sleep, we don't necessarily mean a huge amount of sleep. In fact, whilst you're at university, you will never be more time poor. So I am suggesting that we really must begin to privilege sleep. It is hugely important for that executive functioning part of your brain. And when students say, I really want to improve my grades, one of my first answers are you getting good sleep? Do you need to put more time into sleep? It is hugely important. We're in a real epidemic around students and getting enough sleep, and often they replace sleep with energy drinks or you know, poor food or poor diet. They skip sleep, they sleep in lectures, they take excessive naps. Okay, nothing's wrong with a nap, but if you're finding regular napping, then there's a bigger issue at hand, and it's obviously potentially around not getting enough sleep, or more importantly, the routine. Okay, so your routine, getting to bed at a similar time every night and making sure that you wake up at a regular time is hugely important, and it sets those rhythms. We can talk a lot more about that if you're interested in it, or you can come and talk to someone or a health professional about your sleep if that's a big problem for you. Okay, time to prepare and actually eat your food. This is something, again, I don't want to, you know, make it superfluous. It's really important that you actually are preparing healthy food for yourself. Again, we tend to find university students are replacing good healthy diets with energy drinks or coffee. That is not a meal replacement. And if you're saying that you don't have enough energy, then the first thing you should be thinking about is, can I at least find some time in my day to sit or, you know, prepare a good meal, sit down and enjoy it, okay? Food is life, okay? Whether, it doesn't matter what cultural background you come from, food is a part of life and it will give you energy. And if you have that energy, you're more likely to feel motivation. So yes, an important thing is making sure you have good meal breaks. All right, and the third thing, when you're designing a time schedule, and it really should be the first thing that goes into your schedule, is things that you enjoy doing. All right, when I ask students when they come to an appointment about time management, what is the first thing they say that should go in a schedule? They will often report their lectures and tutorials and work and all of those things. No, okay? Actually, the first thing you should be privileging is the things that are important and that give your life meaning. So if that means that you've got social events that are important to you, that are a regular thing, so not your, you know, day to, like random things that come up, but actually putting time aside to do the things that you enjoy that matter to you. Because again, we find that when you're doing something like reading a book or something that's a personal thing you love doing, it's not outcome driven. It's the process of doing it that is really enjoyable. And when you engage in things that are process driven, you are going to feel more healthy, more happy, and more motivated. So it all feeds back into our bigger point. Okay, so again, I'm sure many of you have heard this acronym before, SMART goal setting. All right, I won't spend a huge amount of time on this because I could spend a whole presentation on these skills. So I recommend you come see someone if you would like to talk more about this. But yes, when you're designing a schedule, it needs to be something that you are in control of, okay, not the other way around. So often people design a schedule, okay, that is controlling them, and they feel like they have to sit and follow everything to a T, and it never works, okay? That's the core problem here, is that we're designing a schedule that is controlling you and not the other way around. You should never feel like the schedule is taking control of you. You need control of the schedule. So to design a schedule that is going to be, you know, respectful of yourself and your time, you need to follow something like this model, which is to make what's in your time schedule specific, measurable, the goals are achievable, that they're relevant and realistic, okay, and that they're timely. All right, so we're not suggesting that, you know, you take a whole afternoon off every week for social things, but that you think really carefully about the time that you're spending on each thing that you want to achieve in a week. So I really make that point again. Your schedule is not there to control you. If it is, you're not going to use it. But it is a broad map. It's to give you a bird's eye view of what you want your week to feel like. It's about a rhythm more than a routine, okay, to give you a sense of all those other important things that we talked about. All right, finally, before we jump into some questions, I wanted to touch on my 5 tips for success, okay? So the first one is that you want to set meaningful goals based on your values. All right, that sounds a little bit hokey pokey vague, but when we talk about values, they are things that are deeply important to us. And when we set meaningful goals based on those, we're far more likely to actually work towards achieving them. So again, what are our values? Well, they're going to be different for everyone. But the key and the trick is that if you can find meaning in any task that you're given for university, whether that be a mundane reading task or some lab report, if you can find deeper meaning in it, what relevance does it have to my future self or right now? What is its purpose to the broader course that I'm learning? You're far more likely to have the motivation within it to actually start it and not get distracted. Okay, learning to identify what you can achieve and again, more importantly, what you are not able to achieve. Yes, there will be times when you have a very big to-do list. So being able to say to yourself, these are the goals that I can achieve and these are the ones that will not get done today is very important for managing expectation. All right, learning to say no. I hope for all you guys that being at UNSW brings about a whole lot of beautiful social experiences for you. But we do need to have that skill in place to be able to say, you know what, I'm really sorry that I can't meet you today. I can't do that thing today, but I'm going to, you know, have a think about it and I'll get back to you. But for now, it's a no, but I promise that, you know, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. That is an integral skill that workplace or in your, you know, future employment will be an expected thing. Okay, that you know how to manage your time and set good expectations for yourself, and as well as not letting those down, letting the people around you down. Okay, this 4th point, really important, which is to start small. Okay, the amount of times I've had students come to me who have said, I don't even open my textbook or I don't even open my readings, because they haven't even seen or respected that that tiny goal could be the difference between getting half an hour or an hour of study done compared to nothing. So being really strategic and having goals that you know are achievable, that are as small as possible, you will find will lead to that motivation. It will help get that trigger, okay, to start something. So I don't, you know, mean that all the time you're going to any task you're given, you're going to break it down into minute kind of smaller tasks, not all the time. But if you're having trouble getting started or finding motivation, that might be a good starting point. Okay, I actually do believe that when we really respect the small things in life, things become a lot more enjoyable. Because when you set small goals and you can achieve them, things start to flow, and there is a positive spiral effect. Okay, when you start achieving, like one of the students said in the chat box, when you start ticking things off, you start to get a momentum. And then we can start to feed into that time schedule and create some rhythm in our lives around the studying, okay? And finally, the last one, which is seeking help early, okay? So, we often find students leave problems and let them fester until they become a really big problem. So what I really recommend is that no matter what point that you come to in your degree, if you're feeling overwhelmed, please reach out for help, okay? There are so many services available, which I'll touch on in the next slide, but we're all here to help you. We're well resourced to help you. So there should be really no issue that you sit in a silo with, okay? So again, there is the student support team, the Nucleus Hub. You may be able to get a copy of this slide if you want to have it on file. That might be something the team can arrange to send to you. There's the psychology and wellness team. So that's there to support you with anything that might be related to your mental health or counselling support. We've got the Learning and Career Hub. Write that down, okay? The academic skills team. They're there to support you with your referencing or your assignments. There's problems that come up with your work. They can actually sit down in either a virtual appointment or a one-to-one and go through those problems with you. There's the Equitable Learning Service, okay, there for disability support, not only physical disability, but any mental health conditions that you have that are chronic, that you would like to register with them. You'll be able to get an ELP plan, and that will be able to assist you to overcome some of those barriers. Peer mentoring, okay, there's a fabulous team at this university that works on connecting you with other peers so that you have one-to-one mentoring support. They also offer live chat, okay? So that I can't tell you is such a wonderful resource. If you're finding it hard to meet people or other friends or make connections, then I would reach out to that peer support team. And then finally, ARC. If you haven't heard of ARC, you will in the very short term. I'm sure that you will hear of them. That is for everything social, okay? All of the clubs, the societies, and then another really good point, they do offer free legal advice, okay? So if that comes up for you, something that you want to get support with, they're there to help you. Okay, so that's it for me. I would love to put it out to you guys to ask you any questions that you have for me around any of the things that we've covered in this workshop. I know we've got about 8 minutes left, so I do hope I can answer as many questions as possible. However, I have spoken to the team and we've discussed that any questions that don't get touched on today, we will put in a Q&A and I will send that to you guys so that you have a copy of any of those questions and those answers. All right, Mahika, do you want to hit me with any of the questions that have come through?
Yeah, so just echoing what Bridie said, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat box and you can like or upvote any questions so that they can be answered more quickly. But we've already had some questions. So the first one is, can you recommend any particular time management apps?
Okay, so I'm very reluctant to give out specific applications. I will speak broadly about apps though, and so what I find is sometimes the problem with applications that if you think about it, where you break down the purpose of an app is that it's meant to kind of alert you to something that you need to do. However, it doesn't really necessarily lay out the processes which are involved to get that task done. So I think any of the apps, I've heard there's one called Toodle or To Do. And I may be able to send a list. I've got a short list of other applications which might be helpful for you. I do want to, again, premise that with just a bit of a warning that any time that we pick up a device like a phone, an iPad, or, something that is online, we are running the risk of slipping into procrastination. And that is, again, a massive issue for people, not just university students, but we've got to start to become really conscious of our applications and how they are actually taking control of us rather than us having control of them. So my advice is, when you're looking at different applications, is to think about, think really carefully about, how will this actually work with me in my day? Will it be good for notifying me of something that's coming up that I might forget? Is it actually allowing me to write down or prioritize tasks? Is it sending me healthy reminders about ways to stay motivated? Maybe, there are applications that do that can send you those kind of prompts. But I'm just really cautious about using applications, because I do think that they can often become a time warp, and we get lost in them. We design a whole lot of things and then we don't necessarily use them. But yeah, please Google, what I did myself when I first started this role. I Googled what some time management apps. They're updating all the time. There's a list that is up to date of 2022, some fantastic, apps. So yeah, just give it a Google and you might be able to find something that you think aligns with the kinds of supports you personally need. Okay, Mahika, any other questions?
Yeah. So we have another question. I've tried using the Pomodoro technique before. Can you recommend any other strategies like this?
Okay, wonderful. So for those who haven't heard of the Pomodoro technique, it is a technique where you're timing intervals for study and breaks. Generally, I think it's around 20 minutes and then a 5 or 10 minute break and then returning to 20-minute studies. These, again, I find can be helpful because knowing the boundaries of time may get you to increase your motivation to sit down, because you're aware that it's only 20 minutes rather than thinking, oh, I've got to study the whole day. So they can be useful, time techniques or setting, intervals. The only problem, again, is that we've got that question of motivation, okay? And we know that sometimes time is not what is going to motivate us. So my recommendations, or one strategy I think is really important, is to perhaps take out a piece of paper and pen. Never underestimate a paper and pen. Okay, take out a paper and pen and draw up 3 columns. And in those 3 columns, try to work out what is the task, number 1. The second column is, what meaning does this have to the broader course or to the assessment that's at hand, whether it's a test, a lab report. So just having a quick note written on the page about what is its meaning to the broader course. And then that final column, which is a lot harder to do, but having a think about, and what meaning does this have to me? Now, you can do that with absolutely anything that you need to achieve in life, and you will find over time it becomes easier to work out those inner values, to put them on the page. So I highly recommend that you start there. Okay, there's nothing flash about it, but writing down those 3 reasons, the meaning behind what you're doing. When it's got meaning, you'll get it done. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions before we wrap up, but I really love this one. Do you have any tips on how to manage the guilt of doing things you love? For example, if you're doing an art piece, but you feel like you should be doing other work, or there's an assignment that's not quite yet due, but you might be feeling like you need to do work on that.
Yeah, okay. So thank you to that person. That is such a wonderful question, because I know myself that I and many other people feel a lot of guilt when we give time to doing things that perhaps aren't studying or perhaps aren't, work related. And I know this is a part of a bigger problem in society, that you are not valuable unless you're being productive, unless you're studying or you're doing work and we've got to start to break away from that perspective. Okay. There is a huge amount of science behind the values of doing things that are creative, that are craft-based, like any art-based project. Also things like sport, we're engaging in problem solving. All of those things are really important for well-being. They are actually ways of increasing your capacity to study, to understand information, to process information. Okay, it's preparing your brain to be in a really healthy state, so that when it does come time to sit down and focus, you're actually able to work a lot better. So you really should not feel any guilt, okay? However, we can talk a lot more about those feelings in an appointment if you'd like to have an appointment. But yeah, guilt is a wasted emotion because, you know, there is no fault. It doesn't go anywhere, the energy that we use in feeling guilt, and it does take our focus away from the tasks at hand. So it is important to talk about it. If you're feeling like everything you're doing isn't meeting expectations, that's what guilt is. Come and talk to someone. I'm sure it will come up for you in your program. I think that is all we have time for. I have noticed there are a few other questions about motivation and time scheduling, which I'd love to talk through with you guys. But for now, that is all. That wraps up today's chat. I'll pass you back to Mahika, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you so much, Brady, for your time today. What an insightful presentation. I've definitely learned a lot of new things. Before I let everyone go, I wanted to let you know that we have a couple more Prepping for Success events taking place today, with sessions on budgeting as well as studying online and remotely. If you are interested in any of these sessions, then please register for the events via the Prepping for Success website, which has just been posted in the chat box. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found this session very helpful, and I wish you all the best for Term 1. If you have any questions following this event, please visit the Nucleus online chat or book an online session with the UNSW support advisors, and some links will be posted in the chat. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day and have a great time at UNSW.